Hello, my name is Anna Maya, and I'm here to talk about, of course, my book report. I chose the book The Case of Female Orgasm, Bias in the Science of Evolution. The author is Elizabeth Lloyd. The book was published in 2005, published by Harvard University Press. A little bit of information about Dr. Lloyd is that she is currently a professor at the University of Indiana at Bloomington. She primarily teaches courses in biology for undergrad and graduate students. I didn't really get that much information as far as what kind of courses in biology. I think that would have been interesting to know. She received her BA from the University of Colorado and her PhD from Princeton University. I also wasn't able to find out what she specialized in or what her major was. So that's that. Her research interests are primarily in philosophy of biology, general philosophy of science, the role of models in science, and gender issues in science. She currently holds the Arnold and Maxine Trained Chair of Philosophy and Science. She currently has published 3 publications. Of course, this book that I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about the structure and confirmation of evolutionary theory in Fairbairn Mills and pluralism. As far as for the intended audience, I believe she, of course, I couldn't really find, or after reviewing the book, I of course didn't really find clear statement as this is intended for, but I believe that she intended this book for anybody who's just kind of a curious cat as to why females have orgasms, and kind of to straighten out all those ideas and hypotheses and assumptions that exist out there. And she provides her plausible explanation as to why she believes one hypothesis that currently exists is accurate and why the others are not. So I believe it's intended for all those, it could be a student, it could be a professor, it could be a mom who's just interested as to, why do females have orgasms? Pretty straightforward. So as far as for the summary of content, as mentioned, Dr. Lloyd is curious in addressing the mystery of the function of the female orgasm, as far as why is it here? Why do we females have orgasms? It's not as straightforward as males. Why males have orgasms? That of course, that's because it creates offsprings and it you're able to reproduce. So that's pretty obvious as to why males have it. But as to women, it's a little bit different. On that part. She talks about the 21 hypotheses that exist out there that help explain why females have orgasms. And out of the 21, as mentioned, she believes that one of them is the correct hypothesis. What I like about it is that she doesn't necessarily say, yes, these are all wrong, and mine's right, but she just says, I believe this one's right because X, Y, and Z, which I'll talk about. She begins her book by talking about adaptation, which most of the hypotheses believe that female orgasms exist because of adaptation from natural selection. That we females have orgasms because it increases our relative fitness in our survival, and that this trait will help us in some kind of way survive. In other words, more than likely reproduce. But she points out that not all women experience orgasms, and she states that in Master and Johnson studies as far as the 4 phases of orgasm, and then she talks about Kinsey as far as the results that state that most women, not all women experience orgasm all the time, and some people don't even experience orgasm, and you are still able to survive. So she kind of lays out those studies out there from Masters and Johnson and Kinsey. So, as mentioned, she believes that most of the hypotheses that exist that explain that female orgasms are a result of adaptation. So, as mentioned, she believes that those are wrong. Her hypothesis that she believes is correct is that female orgasm is a byproduct of male orgasm. She believes that it's similar to as why males have nipples. Like, it doesn't have a function, it's just an embryonic result byproduct, as, because the females has it. So it's like, the males have it, so we have it, so it's a byproduct. So she believes that that's the most, and which has nothing to do with adaptation. So she believes that the whole idea of adaptation is wrong, and that it's simply a byproduct, embryonic byproduct of the male orgasm. So that's the only reason that's her number one key, and she's pretty strong. She dedicates a whole chapter to it, chapter 6, as far as what she believes it's a byproduct. In chapter 8, she lists out all of the assumptions that exist out there, as far as the hypotheses that are for adaptation, and what she believes are wrong. Let's see. Critical analysis. Definitely this book is consistent with what I have learned about sexuality in this course, because she's factual. She lays out all the options as far as the hypotheses. She analyzes them very clearly, and we have talked about Masters and Johnson and Kinsey, so definitely she's very strong about those two studies that were done. So they're definitely consistent to what I have learned. So it's definitely, her book is definitely consistent to what I have learned in this course. Because it was great to able to kind of read her book and say, oh, I know who Masters and Johnson's is, and I was able to kind of refer to, your lecture slides, and then her book, to kind of get an idea and kind of link those two ideas together and, kind of formulate ideas. So definitely consistent. As mentioned, her book is based on scientific evidence, because she lays out all these, and she lays out all the different hypotheses, as mentioned, that exist by all the researchers. So definitely very factual as far as evidence on there. So as far as her opinion as to why it is a byproduct, I'm not necessarily convinced. But it is a good point. I think it's a possibility, as she also does mention that she says, I'm not saying that this is right, but it's a possibility. Adaptation might be a possibility, but so might my hypothesis be. So, but as mentioned, I believe, I don't know, I definitely believe that there has to be some type of evolutionary result of female orgasm because of adaptation. I think there it has to be. I don't want to say it has to be, but I do think there is a link between female orgasms, and the reason why we have them is because maybe they increase our sexual stimulation, therefore resulting in us having sexual relations or intercourse with males, because perhaps we're trying to reach orgasms because it's pleasurable. So, and maybe it is because of the byproduct, but I also kind of believe there's a little bit of adaptation in there. As far as the biases in the book, as mentioned, she points out in chapter 8, a whole chapter as far as for the assumptions. Some of the assumptions and the biases out there are that, I'll kind of briefly state them, are that the assumption that female orgasm is tied to reproductive success, and thus that it is an adaptation, which we talked about. The second one is the assumption that female orgasm should be examined only as it appears with intercourse. On that, and from Kinsey, we know that that's not true. Because it's mostly, a lot of women experienced orgasm with assisted assisted orgasm, as far as, direct stimulation of the clitoris, or is either done by you or your partner. The third one was the assumption that sexual intercourse evokes the same response in men and women, namely orgasm. The fourth is the assumption that female sexual response is like male sexual response more generally. The assumption that female sexual intercourse or response is dictated by hormones in pre-hominids or early hominids. The assumption that female non-human primates do not have orgasm, and therefore that orgasm is a uniquely human trait. And the assumption that evidence for female orgasm, when one female mounts another, counts as evidence that female orgasm occurs during heterosexual copulation. So there's that. So those are kind of the biases. There's a lot to talk about as far as biases, so I don't want to get too detailed in that on there. The author definitely has a strong educational background in the area that she is talking about. As far as me agreeing to if the byproduct hypothesis is, of course she's more experienced than I am, but that's just kind of, the education that I have at this moment. So that's why I'm going a little bit for the adaptation on that. So she definitely does have a strong educational background, because you can tell. I have seen some of her speaking, some of her lectures online that I was able to, kind of put a face to it and kind of see, kind of her interest as far as what she is more so, just to see how she cared. I don't know, that's just who I am. I like to see in person and put a face to it and see just how strong of a passion she has for this subject. And in the book it just clearly states that she definitely has a strong educational background. She has definitely laid out her work. She has definitely named all these studies that she has studied and overlooked and reviewed, and then she formulated with this hypothesis, which is of course wonderful. As far as for the quality, I would definitely recommend this book for all those who are interested in biology and are curious more specifically in the evolution and of course the female orgasm, which is a fascinating, interesting topic, because a lot of people like to know that kind of stuff, either regardless of what sex, if you're a boy, if you're a male, if you're a female. So I definitely would recommend this book. As far as for the strengths of this book, is that I feel like she beautifully organized them really well. She organized them as far as for, the chapters, as far as bias, the byproduct, which she believes is one, and then she kind of, of course, the introduction as far as adaptation. She laid out all citations. It was right on point. So it was very factual, easy to follow. So it wasn't just for, professors. It wasn't a book strictly for those, professors or researchers. It was a book for everybody. So I definitely do like that. The weaknesses, I didn't really find any weaknesses from the book. I really didn't find any weaknesses. I really liked the book. I do like the idea of Darwinism. I like how she beautifully laid out the, definitions for those who, for example, aren't knowledgeable for adaptation. She laid out all explanations to help explain for any reader who is interested in knowing but perhaps doesn't know, too much as far as reproductive success or fitness or natural selection. But if you were to read this book, she explains that. So I definitely, as I mentioned, I would definitely recommend this book to anybody. So I wasn't able to find any weaknesses. And that concludes my video. Thank you.